All right. So I want to welcome you all to the Monstrositas Minute. This is episode 11, and this is a conversation that I've wanted to have since 2008. So bringing on Mark McLaughlin today. Hear a little bit of feedback on my own side. That's my own fault. But like I said, Mark McLaughlin here to talk to us today about all things strength training, conditioning, and just want to shoot the shit with you, man. I started this podcast as I really wanted to talk to people that I've always wanted to talk to, and you are on my bucket list. So today I get to knock that thing off my bucket list today. But welcome, Mark. Welcome, Mark. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into strength conditioning, and just like what your path is right now, where you at currently.
Yeah. Well, first off, I love the name of the podcast. Number one, it's awesome.
Thank you.
So I grew up with there was 4 boys in our family, and sports was a big part of that. And playing outside and being active and doing a lot of different things was kind of how we grew up. That was my mom's babysitter, so to speak. And as you know, with 4 kids, sports, it can be a lot. And then I was fortunate to have a good high school career in 2 sports. And then I was able to play college 2 sports, basketball and baseball, for a couple of years.
That's a load,
and
man.
then from there, I ran a couple marathons. I did triathlons. I raced my bike competitively for a number of years. And so sports has just always been a big part of my life, and still is to this day. Mm-hmm. And probably about 1995, I read in the local newspaper about some catastrophic injuries that were happening to athletes, high school athletes in particular. And, one athlete broke their femur. There was 3 athletes from one school that had anemia. There was another athlete that had hamstring injuries. Mm-hmm. And these injuries came from track and field. So, the femur wasn't a car accident or a football play or something like that. It was at the last 200 meters of a cross-country race.
Oh, wow.
And so, I read that and I'm like, okay, this is like wrong. This is just not right. And so that started me on my journey to learning more about, training athletes. Why is this happening? I went out and observed some practices with some of these schools that this stuff was happening at. And from there, I started researching to see if I could train myself, and then hopefully take, the knowledge that I learned and start training athletes. And so I trained myself for a couple of years. That went well. I volunteered at my high school for 3 years to, take these, methods to see if that's what I wanted to do. And then in 2003, I started my journey on going full time as a strength coach and open my own business. And then, from 2003 to current, I've always worked with athletes, whether it be in the high school realm, even, younger than that, probably 5th or 6th grade, all the way up to, training my parents. And so the knowledge base and what I've, learned over the years has, keeps changing from year to year. Cause like I love the process and I love learning. And so I'm never, satisfied with what's going on. I always want to see if, I'm on the right path with the athletes that I'm working with.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Because you have from what I can tell, having read the Elite FTS logs and whatnot, it was a very different methodology than what people were doing back then. Things have kind of shifted. I think there's ebbs and flows in what people do for training during certain times. Like during the BAMPA times, like, all right, well, you can do aerobic work. And then there went this time where, everything has to be anaerobic. And it's like now we're kind of getting this mixture like, it could be a little bit of both. but where did you kind of develop your mindset or develop, your methodologies within itself? Because it was so much different than what I knew, coming into things.
Yeah. So when I first started, and I think at that time, so, the internet was becoming, a thing. And so I started reading about Louis Simmons. And I think, Louis Simmons, Charlie Francis, Dave Tate, Elite Fitness, like those were those three influences. And so at the beginning, it was very, okay, we're going to do Louis for strength. We're going to do Charlie for sprint and tempo. And, which is, I think, how a lot of us learned. And so that's what we did. And then I got the Omega Wave. So now I could start monitoring people, athletes, how their, heart rate variability, how they were adapting to stress. But even for the first couple of years, it's like I really didn't have a good understanding of, physiology and exercise, because I didn't go to school for that. Like, I had a job selling food packaging, up till I was, 37. And then, when I got to be 35, 37, I started teaching myself. And so the internet was my classroom, and a handful of coaches I would communicate. So that was the first foundation of it. And then in 2007, I had a seminar at my training facility, and Val Nasedkin, who founded Omega Wave, gave this seminar. It was a 2-day talk. And that, in those 8 hours, over those 2 days, it changed the course of how I thought about exercise, training, adaptation. And there was like 4 or 5 of us that it was like one of those aha moments that I think we have a few of those in our career and in life. And on Monday, the seminar was on Saturday. On Monday, we wrote everything that we had been doing. So Louis, Charlie, Dave, like all this stuff was on the whiteboard, and we just erased it all. And then we put up what Val had taught us on, the cardiac system, low intensity training, slow and fast twitch fiber. How do we make those like all of this theory and practical application. And then from that day forward, it just kind of started me down the road of, okay, this is kind of how I need to look at it and program it. And okay, now the Omega Wave makes a lot more sense, because I know kind of what I'm looking for now, the type of adaptations. Okay. So that was kind of the evolution of it.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
And then all those writings that I started doing on Elite Fitness there in 07, 08 was kind of the start of that journey. And then also you had, on the football side, because Elite Fitness, like, I don't think people, because it's been a while now, but, there was Tom Myslinski, there was Buddy Morris, there was Jim Wendler, Landon, wrote on there for a while, James Smith. So you had these very influential, smart people talking about stuff that like really kind of drove me down all these rabbit holes of, training theory, methodology, and then application.
Like that was it for me. Is my podcast, or my business, is named after my first assistant. Like his phrase was always like, "All right, Lee, we're going here. We're going to get monstrosities and this and that."
right.
And that always stuck with me. It was on our team shirts, and all that.
Right.
Even when I moved on past him, but he passed away about a year ago. So it's just like, we need to name this. This is a word that's always stuck with me. So it's going to be named after him. But long story short, this is how he's the guy that pointed me towards Elite. And like from that day that it was there, it's like your whole mind just like opens up and you're like, holy shit. Like, what have I been missing? It's like you would get in these stupid arguments over, or well, if you clean or don't clean, you guys aren't going to be powerful enough, and this and that, and like that's such a surface level argument. It's just a tool, but those would be like the arguments strength coaches would have back then. But then it's like there's so much more to this. It's not even funny. Like that's just a tool, but we're like not even developing the body. So like that's like all that took me down these rabbit holes, like you said, with Buddy and Tom and James and yourself and like all these different guys. And I eventually brought in a graduate assistant who came under James, and he brings me this thumb drive, and it's got like 1,000 different research articles on it from all over the Soviet bloc. And it's like, holy crap. Like it's like your real education doesn't come in a classroom. Like I've got a master's in exercise science and I didn't know any of this stuff. Like we didn't talk about any of it. So it's like in about a year's time, I feel like I got more education from reading like your guys' material than I did in 4 years of being in school. So it's kind of sad,
and then I mean, I think the the learning process within training, like you said, like the classroom to the practical application. And then, as you start working with younger athletes, like, what they need, how they should be trained, building a culture that is, allowing them to explore and giving them the freedom. And then, because, I mean, let's be honest, I mean, at least with me, where I'm at now, and even back then, like, maybe 2% or even 1% of the athletes that I work with were going to go professional or even go to college. And so I always thought of my job as, giving a love for being active, being outdoors, exploration, being healthy was really kind of the main part of my job, so to speak. And so that, like all that stuff early on kind of really influenced me to, give the athletes a really good foundation of, hey man, I love to do this because I want to do it, not because Jeff or Mark is, yelling at me to do this. And so that's always stuck with me from day one.
Yeah. I think that's awesome because it's for me, I was never a great athlete. I was a terrible high school center, and that's the only thing I was even reasonably good at, but I could lift weights. And like, that's the one thing that always stuck with me. And I've lifted weights since I was 12. It's been something where I went to a basketball camp and these guys in Northern Iowa were nice enough to tell me, you should just go lift weights. That's what stuck with me out of that message that they gave me at the end. It was like, you're not going to be worth a damn. Like no one needs a 6'7".
Right.
But it was, it opened up so many possibilities for me because I didn't even know being a strength coach was a job until my high school basketball coach told me a couple of years into college, like, why don't you like this so much? Why don't you just pursue it? I was like, that's really a job? Like people really get paid to do that?
Right.
He's like, well, yeah. And then I was a teacher's assistant inside one of my weightlifting classes at Western Illinois. Same thing. He's like, you want to think about this? Okay, yeah. Well, sounds good to me. How do I do it? And then you get into a couple of internships and and then like for me, the rest is history. I met my wife during my internship. So that's how powerful this has been for us, just being in the field, met my wife without having taken that opportunity. We never would have these 4 boys. It's like, for me, it was life-changing. So I hope that it's a message I have a hard time conveying to high school boys because they were just like I was, like just total knuckleheads. So once you break down the knucklehead facade, it's like, guys, we do this because we love it. So learn to embrace the process because you're not going to squat 500 pounds tomorrow. And if you do, you're a freak. You don't belong here.
Right.
But you need to embrace the process and just to enjoy what it's like to grind through something and try to problem solve it yourself, because you're not going to encounter a problem with your weightlifting, in high school, really. Like it's a pretty much a linear projection. Once your hormones kick on, it's straight up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to get them to love it is I think it's probably the best part about it. And it's the greatest thing that I could give to anyone else is that gift of, just wanting to go in there and do it for themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. I got a couple of topics I want to talk to you about today.
Yeah.
The first one is like, where do you go about with developing like raw power? Like for me, it was always the Charlie Francis approach. It's jumps, it's throws, it's sprints. But is there something else that works better? Because you mentioned the Charlie Francis approach, and then my light bulb kicks on. It's like that's exactly how I how I process everything, like in terms of training. All right, it's Charlie, it's Louie, it's Dave, just like you said. But it's, you know, in terms of, let's just say you have minimal equipment and minimal space, which is kind of, if you're a high school strength coach, that's pretty much your thing, unless you live in Texas. So like, where do you start with a kid? Like, where do you begin with that past like basic jump mechanics?
Yeah. So with a lot of the kids that I see, just the overall fitness capacity is low. So getting them, you know, fitter will improve that power. And so, you know, starting off with some type of measurement, whether it's a broad jump, whether it's a triple jump, you know, single leg hopping or something like that. So, you know, now you have a baseline, and then within the, you know, how you start them on training, kind of that remeasurement, you know, every, you know, God, man, at that age, you know, you could test them once a week on something, but, you know, having something that's going to internally motivate them, and then also externally motivate them against their peers. And then a lot of it is how I started now is with basic gymnastics. So it's tumbling, it's handstands, it's, you know, frontward, backward rolls. It's kind of exploring, you know, the movement. And if you watch the videos, because I have a lot of them on these athletes, like within that 15 to 20 minutes, they're getting anywhere from, you know, 20 to, you know, 60, whether it be broad jumps or some type of vertical movement. And so you're, you know, kind of getting, you know, 3 or 4 different training stimulus just within, you know, the gymnastics. Plus it's good for their, you know, bone health, how to fall, like all of these things. And then from there, with the younger athlete, it may be like the basic, like Vern Gambetta strength circuit, where, you know, you're doing, you know, body weight squats to a body weight lunge to a body weight step up, and then, you know, 5 to 10 pogo jumps or vertical jumps, and, you know, doing multiple, you know, circuits of that. And, you know, maybe doing some box jumps or something like that. So with that developing athlete, I think it's test them, number one. You know, the second is just get them moving. You know, the third thing is, you know, getting them some basic strength with, you know, body weight, and then just trying to, you know, get that going for as long as possible. Because I think with what happens sometimes with the younger athlete is some of these kids, it's their first time training.
For sure.
Like, you know, ever. And so there may be a fear factor there. There may, you know, they have other things that are kind of outside of that. So maybe they're coming, you know, twice a week. And so trying to build, you know, a joy of them coming. So, you know, so they build up that consistency, even if it's consistently, I'm coming 2 times a week. And then, you know, from there, as you just said, you know, age, hormones, all of these things, you know, at a certain point for all of them will kind of take over. And then, you know, you can kind of continually add, you know, on that stimulus. And, you know, I heard an interesting talk that Randy Huntington did. I forget what YouTube video it is, but, you know, he talks about elasticity and jumping. And he said, you know, high hurdle hops are, in his opinion, one of the easiest ways to lose your elasticity.
Really?
So after I heard that, with our athletes now, I do a lot of pogos, you know, a lot of, you know, ankle pops, low hurdles, like say 7 to 12 inches, you know, to try to build up, that elasticity and coordination, and start those good jump, fundamentals, at the ankle and the foot and all that. And so that's another guide that I use within training to see how they're executing, those jumps. And now, fortunately, I just got a Kaiser calf raise, so we can work on ankle stiffness, with that.
So you find that that's an area that, like, for a lot of like basketball, I think a lot of basketball kids, they get locked in these active ankles at a young age, and that definitely, to me, that always limited something. It's like, do you think it's more the power development comes to the ankle as opposed to like the knee and quad?
Yeah. So with that seminar we had with Val back in 2007, on the end of my notes, he talks about the foot, training from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, back then, we started doing a lot of, barefoot, ankle hops, different things like that to strengthen it. We were doing foot exercises, with a towel.
Mm-hmm. But
then I heard Randy talk about, the work he did with, Mike Powell and, Sue, this past year, where, his ankle, that's where he was leaking a lot of power. And so I think, okay, if one of the best track and field coaches in the world is saying this about his athletes who are already at the elite level, okay, our athletes immediately have a deficit. Like, so how do we train that to, try to improve that? And then, in change of direction sports, that ankle, it just makes sense. Like, keeping that stiffness and everything through that is just going to allow you to, change direction better, maybe stay out of ankle sprains, high ankle sprains. Yeah. So then you kind of move into injury prevention, if you want to call it that, on, doing this some of stuff. And then it's going to improve your overall power.
Yep. I like that.
And then this last year, I implemented some different activities to help intent. So I have a 9-foot dunk hoop in the weight room.
That's awesome.
So we would do we called it the dunk complex. So we would do, say, 5 Kaiser leg press, and then immediately they would go down and do like, 2 or 3 dunks, however they wanted to do it. So then trying to make this power work within the weight room, like, have some purpose to it, that the kids, who doesn't want to dunk it? I mean,
no joke.
Okay, put it at 7 feet and let me dunk it now, So again, trying to make this atmosphere, the culture, whatever you want to call it, athlete centered on what they love to do. So anyway, that's another way, I think, to improve power, is putting some sort of measurable to it. Like, I have 2 tether balls that I'll put over the racks. I'll, put it at a certain height, and the kids try to jump up and hit it.
I like that.
And hold on a second. Oh yeah. So talking about Louis Simmons, so I think, man, Louis he was such a great guy, and giving him his time, and so this is one book that he talked about. And that idea of jumping up to touch it comes from this. Like, I didn't invent that. And then, I don't even know if this thing is in print anymore. But, there's a ton of different things that I think keep the like, you could, like, for the, kickboxers or Muay Thai, like, okay, putting a ball up and then having them jump up and try to kick it or something. So there's a ton of different ways that we can improve power that are, I think, kind of outside the typical, jump moves.
It's so easy to get locked into the things, and not think about the things that might apply to them more, you know, like you just said, well, put a ball up there and see if they can go kick it. Like it's just outside of a normal person's thought, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I saw a video this morning of Krauser. He was doing a jump out to a box that, he's jumping onto. It must be 5-6 feet out there. So, you have this world record holder doing this stuff that, obviously he enjoys. And it's so, in the Werner Gunther videos, like there's so many examples of guys training in a powerful fashion that are just outside of, basic, box jumps all the time.
Yeah, I like that. Well, very cool. I'm gonna check out that book from Louis. My personal Louis story is I called their gym one day, and I was at Canisius College at the time. I listened to him talk about Olympic weightlifting, like this and that, and I'm just like, all right, well, I'm gonna give this a try. I'm gonna call Louis because people say he'll always talk to you. He talked to me for an hour. He didn't even know me, but he just, well, you need to do this, you need to do this, and you need to try this. It's like, what? Like, I couldn't believe that a guy, like, he's world famous. Like, why would he take an hour to talk to me? That just blew my mind entirely. But all he wanted to do is talk training. I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way a lot of those guys were. And that's like, Jim Wendler, who was super, super influential with me early on. Like, him and I would get on the phone and, talk. And, I wrote some articles before I was on there, for him. And so, that's why I think giving back and talking to people and talking about it is, I think important to get, a different perspective on things.
For sure. I would never turn away anyone that had a question about what we did or how we did it at SEMO or Canisius or anything. I never turned anybody away. If you want to come back and you want to grab a nugget from it, great. I'm happy to have somebody else out because I know there's a ton of people that helped me, and they probably it was just what they did. No one is finding this new thing. We're all kind of reinventing and making it a little bit better, but nobody's Milo and nobody's carrying the bull. So like that one's already been done. That's a few thousand years ago. But I just think it's so cool. And like Jim Wendler, I would call and get quotes from him when he was at Elite,
Right.
God, he was so funny. I would talk about, I would have this problem with one of my coaches. And I was like, man, she's just so shitty to her players. And he's like, the quote that always, I use this one to this day. And he's like, the people that, how do you say it? It was something about like the bully having their underwear stuck in the trees or this and that. Like talking about there being a coup,
Right.
But it was just one of those I still use it to this day. And I talk about, and the kids in my classroom be like, what are you talking about? The underwear stuck in the trees.
Right.
It's like, guys, you wouldn't understand it. Like I'm mad I can't even directly quote it right now, but it's going to come to me later. But he was always such a good dude, and he would always give me some input on like some things that we were doing. He'd always ask. It's like, what are you guys doing right now? And it's like, because we were one of the first programs that actually tried 5-3-1 as he wrote it. In the original trilogy book. We ran it for it was men's basketball we ran it for. And he would get some input from me, and I went to SEMO and we started using that for our freshman football players. And then like we tested 150 pounds above training maxes. That was the average. And he's like, holy shit. And he's like, yeah, it's 53 guys I can show you this for. So like I sent him that data, and he was so appreciative of it. And same here, I was just happy, to find something that was easily workable for a younger guy, because I didn't want to throw him into the rotations that we were using for our older guys that were more experienced. I wanted to give him something that's introductory and teach him how to grind and teach him how to really strain. And 5-3-1 will do that to you when you're up in those 15, 20 rep sets. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I thought it was super cool. And like I said, I got the data to this day. I could pull it up off a thumb drive and send it to anybody. It was just so cool to be able to have something like that. And he's just like, it's pretty much average, like it's right. People will do that.
Yep.
Cool, man. I have one. You mentioned Val Nasedkin. I don't want you to release anything that you can't, but what did he teach you about the aerobic system? Because I've got some ideas of things I think that from your logs, but I don't know exactly. So like there are different zones that you always talk about training in. I think there was aerobic efficiency, aerobic development, and I don't remember past that.
So those terms were actually based off of the first omega wave system that I had that were part of the assessment. And at that seminar that I had in 07, the first thing that, Val talked about with the aerobic system, and actually it started with, the cardiac system, is how the left ventricle, is, used in exercise and how it can be developed and the importance of it. And I think now there's a trend, on Twitter and stuff where, people talk about conditioning as this, standalone, silo that, we're going to do this because we have to for our sport, because it, makes us tougher, it makes us stronger, or, okay, you don't need to do any conditioning because you're already getting that in your practice. And to me, I look at it as a recovery tool, meaning if you develop that, the cardiac system or the aerobic system, it's really there to help you recover from, the single bout of exercise to, a long practice to multiple practices during the week to a long season. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think people of influence will say, you don't need a condition. Well, that's, to me, is just wrong. Because if you do get a strong or, better cardiac aerobic system, you're going to sleep better. With sleep better, you can recover better and you can go harder on those key practices. Better parasympathetic tone is just going to allow you to be, more relaxed, and there's, a less cost to some of this stuff. And so with Val, he broke it down on the cardiac system, basically with two different functions. So you had your very low intensity, which at that point, he said, 100 to 120 beats per minute is going to fill that chamber with more blood to stretch it. So that's where you get your efficiency.
That's low heart rate, right? Byproduct of that is low resting heart rate, right?
Yeah. So, more blood in the chamber, stretch the heart, bigger, hold more blood volume, lower heart rate. And then there was the opposite side of that, which is the strength side, where that heart doesn't get a real chance to relax, so you're building, the strength in it. And at that point, he was saying, 120 to 140 beats per minute. And with team sports, he said that you need a combination of both. So that low stuff is more for the endurance athlete. And, the higher stuff, the more medium stuff was more for the team sport athlete. So, that was kind of the base, or kind of that cardiac development. And then, you could then see it on the HRV, once we started doing that, of, guys resting heart rates going down, parasympathetic tone improving, training improving, the ability to have more density, higher sessions, more continuity within the process, it just improved. So, and that, and then at these ages, if they have good quality all the time, the improvements are, pretty substantial, as you saw with, some of your groups. And then you have the adaptations at the muscular level. So, the oxidative capacity of the slow fiber, and then the oxidative capacity of the, medium and fast fiber. And when you look at team sport athletes on the slow fiber side, the ability to still go fast and hard, but not tapping into those glycolytic tissues so early, it just allows you to go harder for longer.
Yep.
And then you realize, okay, that was a game changer. Like, now we can give our guys more capacity, both upper body and lower body, for, the task at hand. And then you can, measure it. So one of the methods that Val taught us at that point was, the slow tempo. So 2 seconds down, 2 up, go for time, multiple series.
Those suck. I want to say that right now. Those suck. But
yeah,
they're effective as hell.
Yeah. And so then I think split squats are the absolute worst with those things. And then oxidative push-ups are so then you did that, but then also you had the fast fibers. So whether it was box jumps you were doing, whether uphill sprints or sprinting with a sled for less than 5 seconds. So then you started to see, okay, and then I would use heart rates on those, on the fast fiber stuff, because you didn't want it to go above your anaerobic threshold. So then you could see improvements on sprint time, but then also, was the heart rate going down during those sessions, but speed was getting faster.
Yep. My football guys lived and breathed on those. Like we would do. All right. So this is how we kind of set things up: is we would tempo run for about 4 weeks, and then we would start on our hill sprints for the last 4. And 20 was our benchmark, but there was days we did 40. There was days we did 50. It's like the recovery was so fast, even from our big guys, that it just blew your mind. And every rep, like you were saying, was 6 seconds and under. Like it was start and stop on the whistle. Wherever you land is where you land, and 90% of them were above that hill. So it was super cool to see. And I've used that a lot with jiu-jitsu guys as well. Like I had a guy that prepped for a world championship, and he would do his deal was, all right, it's a 6-second sprint. You walk back down when your heart rate hits 130, we go again. So he was doing upwards of 50, 60 reps in a 30-minute, period. And the guy went through a 44-minute catch match. So like that was the bread, that kind of showed what it actually could do, So it was like, it's not just me saying do this. Like he was like sold after that. It's like, yeah, I got you, man.
Yeah. So when I started at the high school here, I would use GPS on those hill sprints.
Okay.
And because in these team sports, it's, everybody is so caught up in, I run 22.5 miles an hour and, which is great. The key to this, though, is repeatability. And so, what kind of drop off were we seeing, or was I seeing within these, sprints at different times of the year over, so if you're a no huddle offense that's snapping the ball every 30 seconds, okay, like how do you look? Now, again, it's not game situation per se, but like, how do you look repeating that? And so to me, it's all about durability. It's, how durable are you to, be within, 90% or 95% of your, top speed over, 40 or 50 plays. And, that's going to help performance in the game. But then also, I also look at it as, okay, how do these kids survive practice? And so you need to give them the capacity to withstand that. And you have to understand how the team practices in order to get there. So, the way that you train is kind of based on the culture within the football team, and you have to back that up into the development of the athlete.
Oh, for sure. Like, I can give you an example there. Like my SEMO guys, we would not coach was anti-conditioning during the season. Like he's like, we don't need to do it. If we're going to do it, I'm going to run 2 gassers and we're done. I'm like, all right, and whatever. So I made sure, I said, guys, like this is going to be the worst time of your life. If you're not pissing blood by the end of summer, then something's wrong. You're just kind of joking with them. But like we came in there but we made the playoffs that year for the first time ever. And we ran 6 down linemen the entire season. And we didn't condition all year. Like that was our product. Like we were in damn good shape, coming into that season. We were able to hold it. Practice was enough of a residual to be able to hold on to it. So I thought that was interesting. And like you say, you need to be able to match that demand of practice. And for us, it was they got into practice. Like, this is it. and coach is like, well, I guess they're ready. It's like, you're damn right they're ready. So it's, to me, that was what really stuck out in my mind. It's like, we're in shape. You'll know it. and you can hold on to it pretty easily.
Yeah. And so, to that point, because, there's coaches that talk about, CNS fatigue and, guys are, getting, tired or they are in shape or they're not in shape. And nobody ever measures it. Nobody ever sees how, this past season with our football team, like I have guys testing HRV every morning. And so I can see the cost of, during the summer, the training response is totally different. Why? There's no school.
Yeah.
They can sleep in. There's a host of stress that's just not there.
Yeah.
But then school comes and practice starts longer, 2 to 3 hours. School. So the workload almost immediately goes up, 100, 200%. So then, you start seeing how the HRV testing is happening. So then I could go to my head coach, who I have a great relationship with, and say, okay, here's kind of what's happening. Here's, how your practice is. These are some things that I think you should look at adjusting. So now it's not, and plus I have the Kaiser leg press. So then I could see what their power numbers were like, overlaid with HRV, and then overlaid with the practice schedule. So now all of a sudden I have like these 3 data points where then I can go to the head coach and really speak intelligently to him, not just telling him what to do, but saying, okay, Steve, here's what we have. Here were my suggestions, take it or leave it. And so then it's this holistic, like you're truly trying to take care of the athlete and try to give the coaching staff and the players a chance to play at a high level.
For sure.
Versus saying,
has to go up.
Yeah. So, versus saying, okay, you don't need to condition. Okay. Why? Tell me why. What data point is coming back to you saying you don't need to do that? Or our athletes have CNS fatigue. Okay. How do you know that? What are you testing? What are you seeing that's telling you that they're fatigued? Is it your training? You don't know. Is it school? Maybe. Homework? Maybe. Girlfriend? Maybe. You don't know. So making these blanket statements of a mechanistic approach to it, and humans are very complex. And so, I think keeping an open mind to what may or may not be happening is very important.
I think I didn't realize that you had that many tools that you could look at, like just for you yourself. I mean, I think that's super cool.
Yeah. So, I get that HRV data to a dashboard every morning.
Okay.
And so then I can look at it, and then in the off season, I can adjust, I can start adjusting stuff. I can adjust volume. Maybe it gives me a chance to talk to them deeper about their sleep, about school. Maybe we need to cut back here. So it just gives you more opportunities to talk to the person and try to help them out. Because a lot of these kids think more is more.
Oh yeah, oh, for sure, for sure.
And the coaches thinks more and more, and fatigue is like, we're going to chase fatigue because it's going to make you better. It's like, no, it's not, man. We need to give them the least stimulus possible that's going to get that effect out.
Yeah. I've never had anything like any of these tools that you're talking about. So like to me, it was always the eye test with them. I'd work them up. I'd kind of see what we look like in season. And then I wasn't hesitant ever to cut them off on a set and say, we're done. Go roll, go foam roll, go stretch. To me, it was just everything had to be by eye test because I didn't have anything. You know what I mean?
And that's great too. Like, I think a lot of coaches don't even do that. They say, okay, I have plan A here. I have 10 athletes here. This is the workout that we are doing today, regardless. Yeah. We're going to do this because, I'm in the weight room. And even though I have, this data and some of this stuff, like 30 minutes may be too much for them today, even though the testing was good. Yeah. And so I think watching and learning and visualizing and communicating, like those are the soft skills that people just don't spend nearly as much time on them as they should. And it takes time, it takes patience, it takes observation. Yeah. It takes not talking very much through these training sessions to kind of learn. And you're going to make mistakes and it's going to be messy. But that's the way it is.
Yeah. I'll tell you, you talked about earlier, there's eye-opening things that happen to you as a person, as a coach. Mine came to me. I was at the Citadel, working with men's basketball, and they came off a conference loss that they shouldn't have had. And the coach came in there. He's like, just wreck them. Like, what? He's like, just wreck them. So we speed squatted that day, and their legs were gone the rest of the season. Like, they did not have the same pop. And I should have just told them just to go pound sand and go home, but I didn't. I was young. I was 22 years old. I didn't know any better. But it's like, that was at that moment, I was like, you probably don't need to do as nearly as much as what you think you need to do in season, because it'll still be there when you need to come back and get it. But I'd like to ask you about HRV, because a lot of people don't know anything about what heart rate variability really is. Could you just talk about that a little bit, and we'll kind of wrap up in a few minutes?
Yeah. So, heart rate variability, it's been around for a long time. I think, mid 50s, I think is when it was developed. And it is, kind of the basic premise of it is, how is your autonomic nervous system handling the stress? So, as we evolved, the fight or flight response was there to, run away from, the predator that was chasing you to try to eat you. So you had to turn that on for, 10, 20, 30 seconds, however long it took you to get away, hopefully. And then, then hopefully after that, then the parasympathetic nervous system would kick in, the rest and relax to, have you recover from that, for the next time it was going to happen. And so what HRV does, it's measuring the balance between those two, systems at rest. And so it's giving you, a reading at the end of, how is your HRV? Is it high or low? It's not telling you what's dictating it. So it's not, I had to do this podcast today, or I have to public speak, or, I did a training session, or, someone almost ran me off the road. It's just, how is your body responding to stress at rest in that given moment? And if you're at rest and you are dominant on the sympathetic side, so, that fight or flight response, then, there's something that you're not responding to at rest in that given moment. So again, it's those things that are, going outside, this general stress. Okay, so then how do you then train or try to bring your back to homeostasis, so kind of that baseline? And within the training mode, on what we can do is, if you're more sympathetic dominant, then you don't want to do any super high intensity work, because you're already there at rest. And so the cost of that training session, if you do that, is going to be much higher. And the chance of adaptation is quite lower, because that window is not open for adaptation. And the chance of injury goes up. So, so what do you do from a practical standpoint? Okay, so you may do some low aerobic work, go for a walk, yoga. You can do a strength session, but just very light, body weight circuit that's not taxing, maybe longer rest periods. And, the way that we measure it now is we use the HRV for training that Marco Altini developed. And you can take it. So I take it every morning on myself, just with my fingertip on my phone. And it takes a minute. And then,
is that an app that you use? Or is that a Megawave, or what is that?
No, it's called HRV, and then the number 4 training.
Okay, awesome.
And so then you can start, with the baseline. It gives you your resting heart rate, and then it keeps every measurement, over time. So then you can start to see the trends.
Yeah.
It runs on the stoplight system. So green is all systems go, yellow and red. So then you can adjust your training, sleep, whatever, to see if you're getting, a positive response to it. And that's another thing about like the aerobic work. It's gonna, if you do it enough at the good low intensity, hopefully it's going to take you to that, moderate parasympathetic side, which is the, rest and relax. And, that's where you kind of want to be. So again, it kind of goes back to people that poo-poo, the aerobic work, or you don't need to condition. Again, it comes back to recovery.
Yeah.
And then with HRV, then you can see, okay, yesterday's session was good. Okay, for whatever reason, I didn't recover, so I'll take another recovery day. The high-low approach from Charlie, I think, was good in theory. And maybe, with the tools that he had, I think, it was probably good for him. But now if you start testing people, you begin to see, okay, this workout yesterday, Jeff is not recovered. Okay, 2 days out, Jeff's still not recovered. 3 days, okay, he's ready to go, so go again. So you begin to see that everybody has their own individual response to the training. And is it training age? Is it, maturity age? All these kind of things start going into it.
Yeah.
And it's a real good insurance policy to, keep, athletes out of injury risk.
Yeah, because otherwise it's such a, I think they've got another week that we can push, because you look at trends. I get check-ins every week, and so I'm looking at trends, and I'm like, now guys are starting to send me like their HRV that comes off their watches, And it's interesting to kind of see. Like, I've got one guy that I've like, dude, we need to back off for a little while. You're prepping for a marathon that's coming up in April. Like, we just need to back off for a little bit. And then he's like, no, I got another week in me. All right. Well, he comes out, he tweaks his hamstring. It's like, dude,
right.
I gave you the leeway, man. And it's almost to the point where I need to shut him down and just tell him, you need to do what I tell you to do.
And the great thing about this app is that after each test, it has a questionnaire.
Okay.
So not only do you get the objective data, then you also get subjective. So, it says, what was your sleep quality? How did you perform during training yesterday? How motivated are you to train today? So then you start getting these questions And then it goes back to, the eye test like you were talking about. And so to me, when I hear athletes say, I need to go use the Normatec, my legs are so sore. I've had 5 consecutive high intensity days in a row. This isn't me training people. This is other athletes I hear talk.
Yeah.
So then these red flags to me start going off on, okay, man, I don't even need HRV now. I know just based. So then all of these inputs are coming in that is kind of allowing you to, make some conversation with the athlete on maybe why we need to back it off. And so, yeah, I mean, and that's why, like, and I think I've been fortunate, like the 3 years I've been at the high school, we haven't had any training injuries.
Yep.
We've only had 1 or 2 sport related injuries in football. And so, and again, part of that is luck. It's not, but I think the more data you have, I think the better informed decisions you can make, so you're not breaking them. And, there's a great saying I heard from this sports scientist, Mark O'Sullivan. And he said, talent is the graveyard. How does it go? Let's see. Talent is the graveyard of success or something. Nobody sees the dead bodies.
For sure.
And so, some of this training that goes on, it's just ineffective. And so with me, I'm trying to, make sure that everybody can, participate throughout their entire career.
That's awesome. Like we're all, it's become like this Instagram culture of wanting to see PRs and all this stuff all the time.
Right.
It's gotten kids even wired into like, well, that's what I need to do. Like I've got a kid that I was his case manager last year. And he's like, oh, I'm a bench 225. I'm a bench 225 today. Comes in, no, it's 205 again, bombs out. It's like, buddy, it's going to come, man. Just don't worry about today. Let's try to worry about 3 months from now. Like it's
right.
Start to. It's hard to get a freshman in high school to think like an Olympic athlete. Like I don't care about today. I don't care about tomorrow. I care about 4 years. What do you look like in 4 years?
Yeah.
Like if you leave as a finished product of here, like you're going to be an absolute freak. But you got to take the steps along the way. And like you even brought it back to the body weight training. Like that's something that so many people just completely discard now. But how many kids can't do a proper body weight squat or even a push-up or a pull-up? I mean, it'll blow your mind.
Yeah. And, if you look at ligaments and tendon health, and I mean, there's just so many benefits to it. And yeah, you're right. You're looking long-term. And then that's part of the coaching process, right? Like, the culture, the culture that you have, it's going to take time to get them integrated into it. It's going to take them time to, to learn it. And, I think people think, okay, I've had this success here. I could go anywhere and duplicate it. And it's like, no. You couldn't, because, the culture that Jeff Lee has is totally different than mine. Not better or worse. It's just different. And so, you can't go in and try to push this round peg into a square hole and expect it to work. And so again, and now I just thought about the quote. It's, talent is a graveyard of evidence. Nobody sees the dead bodies.
That's a good one, though. It's the truth, though.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
So yeah.
I like that. So I have one more question about this HRV app that you're talking about. You say that kids can use that on their phone and it goes right to you. Is that how that works?
Yeah. So So they and the app costs $10 and it's a lifetime membership. So all you need to do is get the coach's dashboard.
Okay.
And then you just link them up. And so I have online clients too. And so I use that with them as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and Marco, man, he does great work. His app is great. You can use a fingertip or you can use a polar belt,
Yeah.
and he's got a ton of research on it, and I think he does just a fabulous job with it.
Oh, cool. I'm gonna give you a moment. Talk to us about your online athletes and kind of plug your business a little bit that way as well.
Yeah. So I have an online business where I work with clients, and I have an array. I have some youth athletes that are. One is a swimmer. The other one is a rugby player. And then I have 7 or 8 special operations people that I work with. So I was fortunate early on to start with some FBI SWAT guys that
Yeah.
I trained up for HRT.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've worked with Delta SEAL teams, all those type of operators, and so I do that exclusively online. So I do all their programming. I look at the HRV. Do all the testing. I use Moxie Monitor with them, and so get them ready for whatever selection process they're going to. And then I also, do consulting on top of that. So,
Yeah. So with your consulting business, is that for like team based, or how's that operate?
team based, coaching, whether it be on, aerobic development system, whether it be, talking about, implementation of, strategies with youth.
Yep.
Because, I really am motivated by, trying to, educate coaches on, training youth athletes.
Yep.
So this coming year, I'm going to actually do a camp out here to, take the different type of methods with young kids and see if I can do it in a camp setting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm being helped out with a former athlete who's getting his doctorate in physical education,
Very cool.
who's helping me with kind of the program there. And so from there, hopefully, if that is successful, then we can, run some different things during the summer, and then maybe, take it online. So those are kind of my short-term goals with that.
I like that. How young do you typically go in terms of the age?
Yeah, so I've been going like 5th or 6th grade. So at the high school I work at, the junior high is across the school or
Mm-hmm.
across the street. And so right now after school, I think we have like 20 to 30, 6th grade all the way up to 8th grade to come over.
Mm-hmm.
And I handle all the training for them. And so, that's been great to, start building, the type of culture that we want within that, within all of our groups. And then they get to see how the older guys train.
Yeah.
The older guys get to kind of teach them on how things, mirror, show them what to do. And it's, they're playing tag, they're playing ultimate football, they're playing rugby, chasing balloons, all the, and the gymnastics stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very, very joyful, atmosphere that I want to embody there.
For sure. And you're definitely going to develop some coaches down the road by doing that as well, by getting them in there and letting them see what it's all about, I think
Exactly.
that's awesome. So it's like your kids down the line are definitely in good hands.
Thank you.
Right. Well, good deal. Really do appreciate having on today, Mark. You can check them out at ptconline.co, and we'll see you on the next one, guys.
Thanks again, Jeff.
Hey, thank you so much, Mark. Happy New Year.
Yep, you too.
Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye.